The title again, A Grand Unification of the Sciences, Arts, and Consciousness, Rediscovering the Pythagorean Plato's Golden Mean Number System. I also have added a few slides that we'll look at quickly at the end, because these things aren't done in a vacuum. There's been a lot of, over the years, work collaborating with many other individuals within the Theosophical Society and other groups, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the Symmetry Group, Keith Critchlow's Cairo Sacred Geometry Group, and I could go on, but let's hit it here now. So the new book of the same title, we just came out with it, 4 authors. I did it with Laila Merrick-Kranjik, Jiwan He, in China, and Muhammad Al-Nashi in Egypt. Kranjik is in Slovenia. So I would like to dedicate this to people in Odessa, Ukraine, who are now being challenged. I was there in 2010 for the International Congress of the Mathematics of Harmony. Beautiful people, many of them Russian as well, and from Belarus, and lovely people. And I'm heartbroken as to what's happening. It's terrible. And of course, this is HPB's birthplace, and that's where Madame Fadeev initially got the one letter from one of the Mahatmas, a Mahatma letter indicating that HPB was well and fine. Leibniz says, if someone can reduce Plato to a system, he will have performed a great service for humanity. And here, of course, we have Plato and Aristotle from Raphael's School of Athens. And of course, Leibniz, and I've got to move my little images here. Leibniz wrote, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. And oftentimes that's what we must do on these esoteric quests. So Roger Penrose, Sir Roger Penrose, who won the Nobel Prize last year for black holes, he writes, the more deeply we probe nature's secrets, the more profoundly we are driven into Plato's world of mathematical ideals as we seek our understanding. That's from his book, The Road to Reality. This was from the pictures from the 2018 Science of Consciousness Conference. Here I'm in Shanghai, China. We're doing the mini symposium on dark energy. On the left, that's Jiwan He, one of my co-authors. And then Muhammad Al-Nashi in the center, and of course, myself. Carlo Rovelli, a theoretical physicist from France, maintains, and I've got my thing covered up here a bit. He says that because we forget that all phenomena, whether mind or matter, are related to one another, that's where we have a problem. I can't even, let me see if there we go. Much of the confusion arises because of this. This relational view, rooted in Rovelli's research in quantum mechanics, demotes the physical objects that are usually the starting point for fundamental physics. The best description, he says, we have about the world is in terms of the ways systems affect one another, in which case Galileo's distinction between subject and object is blurred, as everything is both a subject and an object, including observers and their minds. There is no view from the outside. In this way, Rovelli sees the relational universe as a very mild form of panpsychism, in other words, consciousness in everything, in that there is something in common between mind and matter. It is the realization that nature is about things that manifest themselves in relationship to one another. This takes away much of the mystery of consciousness. Now, this is not a new view for not only David Bohm, but as we'll see, for theosophy as well. And as Bohm wrote, for the human being, all of this implies a thoroughgoing wholeness in which mental and physical sides participate very closely in each other. There is no real division between mind and matter, psyche and soma. Each human being participates in an inseparable way in society and in the planet as a whole. Such participation goes on to a collective mind, and perhaps ultimately to some yet more comprehensive mind, in principle capable of going indefinitely beyond even the human species as a whole. And in the introduction, you mentioned Bohm's ideas of implicate and explicate order. And then there's the super implicate order. What we're going to see is that the one in the indefinite dyad is the super implicate order that gets through the golden mean number system. The implicate order enters into all of nature, and that's where the explicate order kind of unfolds before us. But it's all folding in upon each other. There is no difference or distinction, separation between the so-called immaterial world and the material world, or Plato's intelligible world of forms and mathematicals, and the physical, sensible world. They are folded together through proportion, and it's golden proportion that does it. We have now finally figured it out. And that's why the golden mean number system we're going to see is the lingua franca, is the language of nature itself. So as K.H. Katumi maintained in Mahatma letter 65, one of the most important letters I have found, we recognize but one element in nature, whether spiritual or physical. Consequently, spirit and matter are one, being but a differentiation of states, not of essences. And then he also says in letter 90, spirit and matter, the two are one, distinct but in their respective manifestations. And then Joy Mills, in her wonderful book Reflections, writes, in the beautiful language of the Book of Quixote, the work from which the stanzas of the secret doctrine are said to be excerpted, spirit is called the ultimate sublimation of matter, and matter the crystallization of spirit. Sophia, and now we may have a Russian in the group, we have before, probably can pronounce that name a little better than me. I'll just call her Sophia, a Russian mathematician. And let's remember, despite this evil culprit doing what he's doing to Ukraine, it is not the Russian people. Russian people are good people. People around the world are good. It just takes one idiot, monster, to do the things that he's doing. But back to Sophia. She writes, it is impossible to be a mathematician without being a poet in soul. And then, of course, John Keats from the Ode on a Grecian Urn, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. And soon we're going to see that the one is the good, and the indefinite dyad, the greater and the lesser, the golden ratio and its reciprocal, are truth and beauty. And that's what one finds at the summit of Plato's cave and one goes into illumination. Another thing I want to focus on is abduction and anomalies. This is so important as to how we actually figure things out and how we go through paradigm change, as Thomas Kuhn over here would indicate in the structure of scientific revolutions. We typically just do normal science. We're basically locked into the paradigm we're stuck in until enough anomalies, puzzles, unique observations occur that we get a crisis in science, we get a revolution, and we get a Copernican revolution, and a new paradigm emerges. And we are on the verge of that right now. Abduction. Now, abduction is a logical method of creative hypothesis formation. Abduction is the only logical operation which introduces any new ideas, and it involves a non-dominant right hemisphere. It's where you get the eurekas, the ahas. Einstein used it when everybody else was fearful of the challenges of black body radiation, the photoelectric effect, and specific heat. Einstein put that in the hopper through the left hemisphere. He took it into his right hemisphere and dwelled on it, visualized, and aha, he came up with relativity theory. which then explain things were not explicable in terms of Newtonian mechanics. It is Charles Sanders Peirce who rediscovered the central role of abductive reasoning or novel hypothesis formation was being used in Plato's Academy and in his writings, as recorded in Aristotle's writings. So here we have an image reminiscent of Plato's Academy above the doors. Let no one unversed in geometry enter here, in this etching by Lorenz Stower. To the one who pursues their studies in the proper way, all geometric constructions, all systems of numbers, all duly constituted melodic progressions, the single ordered scheme of all celestial revolutions should disclose themselves. And disclose themselves they will, if, as I say, an individual pursues their studies aright with the mind single-pointed, fixed on their single end. As such a person reflects, they will receive the revelation of a single bond of natural interconnection between these problems. The golden mean number system connects everything in this incredible harmonic symphony. And as H.P. Blavatsky indicated, Plato is the world's interpreter. Not just one of them. She even, in the Mahatma letters, Kutumi says he's a fifth rounder. We're in the fourth round. They're ahead of their times when they're bringing back wisdom from the future. The ideas of both Pythagoras and Plato were identical with ours. That's from the Key to Theosophy. And of course, Plato is a Pythagorean. Pythagoras was an initiate, one of the grandest of scientists. Plato and Euclid were initiates. And in those mysteries, it was forbidden to reveal the secret, the proportion secret, the secret of the golden ratio. Euclid learned his geometry in the mysteries. Modern men of science only rediscover their old truths. That's from the Intergroup Teachings of Blavatsky by Sperenberg. The geometrical key of the, sometimes there are 7 keys, 9 keys, etc. But the geometrical key also, according to Blavatsky, underlies the biblical structures being found in the measurements given for Solomon's Temple, Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark, and all of the symbolical myths in short of the Bible. Now, this is of the highest significance and is oftentimes missed. Most significantly, it is the golden proportional symmetry that was revealed in the ancient initiations, passed down by the adepts of the fourth root race. And it is within this initiatory tradition of the mysteries that, quote, I've paraphrased the top, but that's exactly what she's getting at. All the rules of proportion are those taught anciently at initiations, and one should acquaint oneself with the truly divine art and understand the deep esoteric significance hidden in every rule and law of proportion. Italics for emphasis are Blavatsky's, not mine. That's from volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine, the 1888 edition. Furthermore, to get a little bit deeper with this, in India, the initiate received the soma, a sacred drink which helped to liberate his soul from the body. And in the Eleusinian mysteries, it was the sacred drink, the kukion, some people pronounce it kaikion, offered at the epopteia. Epopteia is when the inner visions opened up and you had illumination. The third part of the mysteries of the sacred rites was called the apopteia or revelation, the reception into the mysteries. It means stage of divine clairvoyance. The third eye is opened, implying revelation by no human agent through receiving of the sacred drink, the soma. And you see on the side here, we do the same things in the rainforest in Peru and Brazil, mysteries of the Amazon. Ndes are no exception. I've studied many, many people, some of them key, like Tom Sawyer, who died during a tonsillectomy and was shown the mathematics of nature, what he called my cosmic gift. He subsequently held over 100 chemical patents. Actually, the the International Association of Near-Death Studies, they gave me all of the discs, recordings of Tom Sawyer because they knew how interested I was in his particular work. Like the rest of the initiates, we see Plato taking great pains to conceal the true meaning of his allegories. Plato shrouds his philosophy in the profoundest darkness. His Timaeus is so confused that no one but an initiate can understand the secret meaning. Plato was under what's called the Sodalian Oath, according to HVB, and it was forbidden to reveal this great secret regarding the proportions. Hippasus did. Hippasus lost his life, the Pythagorean, when he revealed how to construct a dodecahedron. And to do that, you must reveal the construction of the golden ratio and so forth. As a proponent of Pythagorean doctrines and an initiate of the Egyptian and Eleusinian mysteries, Plato had to be extremely careful. The golden sectioning of his divided line in the Republic expeditiously solves many of the Platonic puzzles and riddles. His method in the written dialogues appears to be similar to his reported approach in the Academy, where he acted as a kind of midwife. Yes, we call Socrates a midwife. Plato was a midwife, drawing the wisdom out of the individuals, their innate wisdom, innate ideas, bringing it out, giving birth. He would present the problem, the puzzle, the anomaly, apparent contradiction or incomplete result, intending that the attentive and resourceful student would abduct, give birth to an explanatory hypothesis, overcoming the apparent contradiction or incomplete result. Carefully and subtly, Plato provided clues which can assist the observer or the reader in this act of abductive discovery or creative solution. We know from Proclus in what's known as the Eudemian summary that Plato presented problems regarding the section, heitome, to which Eudoxus and Leodamus made many discoveries applying abduction. In fact, Eudoxus, quote, multiplied the number of propositions concerning the section, applying the method of analysis. For them, analysis, as was dialectic, by the way, is apagoge, or abduction. Sir Thomas Heath, here pictured on the right, noted that the section must have referred to the golden section, which arises in Euclid, namely the division of a straight line in extreme and mean ratio, which appears in Euclid Book 2, Proposition 11, and is therefore most probably Pythagorean. And then, of course, in Book 13, that's all about the use of the golden ratio and other root ratios in terms of the Platonic solids and constructing them. I just want to note a very good friend of mine, Robin Heath, who also did some of the wooden books, including Stonehenge, Ancient Temple of Britain, and wrote with John Michel, The Lost Science of Measuring the Earth, along with his brother, Richard Heath, and his books, Harmonic Origins and Matrix of Creation. These are the nephews of Sir Thomas Heath. Incredible, incredible geniuses, both of them. So now we see the 5 regular Platonic solids named after Plato, and we have the tetrahedron, octahedron, and icosahedron, all of which have equilateral triangles as faces, and therefore their faces are ruled by the square root of 3. The cube or hexahedron, which represents Earth, is root 2. The diagonal of a square gives us root 2. And by the way, tetrahedron fire, octahedron air, icosahedron water. But the dodecahedron was reserved for very special what should we say, classification. It represents the cosmos and impose the images and the proportions on the others as well. But it's very unusual. It's conspicuous by its absence in terms of the construction in the Timaeus. So in the Timaeus, after proposing the root 2 and root 3 triangles as the fundamental structural components of nature and of the regular solids, while inexplicably not addressing the dodecahedron structural component, Plato writes, and here it is. And anybody who can't see this, I mean, you look at this and you realize he's giving you the farm. He's letting you know These then we assume to be the original elements of fire in the other bodies, but the principles which are prior to these, God only knows, and he of men and women who is a friend of God. Anyone who can point out a more beautiful form than ours for the construction of these bodies shall carry off the palm, not as an enemy, but as a friend. He who disproves what we are saying and shows that we are mistaken may claim a friendly victory. Timaeus 53a to 54b. Hint, hint, hint. And furthermore, he also cryptically, at the beginning of the Timaeus, begins 1, 2, 3, but where is the fourth, my dear Timaeus? Yesterday, the day before, they had a fourth party, the philosopher who was there, but he has become ill. And so, yes, there is a missing individual, but we know from Speusippus, his nephew, and the Timaeus, that there were three triangles. One was an equilateral triangle representing one, because all the sides are equal. And then the two triangles he gives us to build the Platonic solids, the root 2 for the cube and root 3 for the three others. But then the fourth is missing to build a pentagon, which then builds a dodecahedron. And of course, anytime we have a pentagon, we immediately have a pentagram. And anytime we have a pentagram, each point of crossing of any of the lines is a golden cut. So here the whole line is to the longer segment here, as the longer is to the shorter, as the shorter is to little baby bear there, the little short. Those are all golden ratios. So it's resonating with golden proportion. And here I've simply taken a pentagram inside a pentagon, rotated it so we get this vertically, put my compass point here, pencil lead there, arc down, cut the line right here, and we get Plato's divided line naturally. So the whole is to the upper intelligible realm as it is to the lower sensible realm, as the world of forms is to the world of mathematicals, as everyday objects are to the shadows on the wall, the reflections. So Plato also gives the key away in the Timaeus as to how nature actually works. And it is through the geometric mean. It's continuous geometric proportion. Everything is folded together. There is no separation between matter and mind, so to speak, or intelligible and sensible, or immaterial and material, as the Mahatmas are saying. Two things cannot be rightly put together without a third. There must be some bond of union between them. And the fairest bond is that which makes the most complete fusion of itself and the things which it combines. And proportion, analogia, so logos is ratio, is relationship. That starts the whole darn thing off, as we'll see in the primordial scission, the golden cut. But then you continue fractalizing through these golden ratios all the way up, all the way down. So the whole universe is self-similar top to bottom. That's why, man, know thyself. If you know the geometry of the human body, you know the solar system, the galaxy, the super galaxy, the universe itself. So again, there must be some bond of union between them, and the fairest bond is analogia, or proportion, best adapted to effect such a union. And the bond is initiated by the first principles of the one and the indefinite dyad of the greater and the lesser. So David Bohm, and what he called the Holo Movement, the movement that is brought into everything from the get-go, is from the very beginning, in which the universe enfolds into everything, begins with what the ancient Egyptians called the primordial scission, the first cut, the golden scission, the golden cut, the golden snit, the one asymmetrically divides into two parts in which all are bound together by continuous geometric proportion. So we have one and we cut it, but we don't cut it in the middle. You cut it in such a way that the whole is to the longer in the same logo, same ratio as the longer segment is to the shorter segment. And the longer segment turns out to be little baby phi, 1/phi, or 0.618, And then when you take something that's less than 1 and you square it, obviously, like 1/2 times 1/2 gives you 1/4. It gets smaller. And so phi squared is roughly 0.38, roughly 0.382. However, when you ask yourself, what is the ratio of the whole line to the longer segment, immediately you realize the longer segment now, the father embeds itself in the son, and now the 1 becomes the longer segment, and the whole is big phi, the greater, the golden ratio. And the small little piece is the lesser, is 0.618. So here you have your trinity that the Neoplatonists taught the Christians, by the way, as to how this works. So you have your greater and your lesser, and then unity in between. In fact, as we're going to see, 1 becomes the golden mean. 1 is the golden mean between the greater, big phi, and the lesser, little baby phi. So Plato says, take a line and cut it unevenly. And of course, line, because you can't do it with numbers, because these are irrational numbers. You can never write it out. But geometrically, you can do it. And you do it in a golden cut. And by the way, if that's the top of the head and that's the bottom of the feet, that's the navel. So the navel cuts us in the golden cut. And I've measured students over the years, many of them. They're usually Fibonacci or Lucas approximations, and a few are exact golden cuts. So when we look at golden proportion now, the interesting thing is through a single ratio, single cut, we immediately get proportion. So that the whole line, symbolized here in gold, is to the longer segment in the same ratio as the longer segment is to the shorter. And so we have big phi is to 1, is as 1 is to little baby phi. But because these are identical numbers, these collapse. And you're really getting phi is to 1 is to phi, as we have on the cover of the new book. This was always the big question in history. We all knew his unity, or 1, is the good. But what is the beauty and what is truth? What is the greater and the lesser? Well, we now know exactly what it is. Furthermore, if you multiply the greater times the lesser, you get 1. If you subtract the lesser from the greater, you get 1. If you take the geometric mean of the greater and the lesser, because when you multiply them, you get 1, and you take their square root, it's 1. So all of these lead back to the source. Everything's bringing us back to the divine. So very simply put, we have Plato's divided line, and here's the golden cut, and it gives us his ontology, what exists, his epistemology, how we come to know. And here at the bottom of the cave, you find acacia, false conjecture, and distorted copies. Here you find in our world, everyday world of ordinary objects, pistis or belief. This is all opinion down here. This is knowledge up here, where you can tether it, you can tie it. And there's this intermediate level that is really quite curious, because Plato doesn't openly talk about it. You have to figure it out. Well, he does talk about it, but you really need to use your noggin. And this is the world of mathematicals, which is like the forms. They're perfect, but there are many. Forms, singular, perfection of each individual form. And here's where you have your direct intuition, and ultimately up at the top of the cave, this is where illumination occurs, and you move back through truth and beauty back to the one, the good. And what else did I want to say in here? You have phi is to 1, is as 1 is to phi. And typically what I do, we don't have time, is I show you a slide where these slide together, because through illumination, when you move up into this realm, you realize that this realm and this realm are really one and the same. This is folded. This is an implicate order that is folded into this order. And then you become aware of the essence of the trees and of the plants and the animals and their geometry, which is coming from here, which is coming from here, which is coming from here. So if we look at it here, we have the one, and this is Plato's three similes in the Republic. And this is really wild what he's done. Nobody's really caught this before. You divide in the sun simile, that's where the golden cut occurs. And then you divide in the divided line, you do the golden cut, but then you divide them in the same ratios again. So you have 4 parts. And then in the cave, you have 8. And these, of course, continue because you would keep going. And these are geometric means. So for example, 2 is a geometric mean of 1 times 4, the square root of 4 is 2, 2 times 8 is 16, 4 is the square root of 16. So he's already hinting that something's going on in here regarding geometric means, geometric proportion, continuous geometric proportion. So what happens then is the 1 is divided into the lesser and the lesser squared, or phi to the first power, phi squared. And then you repeat that, phi squared is to phi cubed, as phi cubed is to phi to the 4th, and as phi cubed is to phi to the 4th, so phi to the 4th is phi to the 5th, as phi to the 4th is phi to the 5th, phi to the 5th is phi to the 6th. And here you have your shadows, your puppets, here's a wall, your puppeteers holding the puppets up, you have a fire, which is casting the shadows, then you have you're moving out of the cave. Now you're looking at shadows, reflections in water outside the cave, then the objects themselves. Eventually you can look at the heavenly bodies, and ultimately you can see the sun. Anomalies in abduction continue. So because the intuition of the non-dominant right hemisphere appears to be involved in abduction, these are typically the eurekas and aha moments of creative inspiration that we see throughout history with a Pythagoras, a Plato, an Archimedes, a Kepler, an Einstein, a David Bohm, or a Sherlock Holmes. And it is why the great theoreticians will place primary focus on what Peirce's friend William James called wild facts, or novel observations, in an attempt to abduct a sufficient explanatory and predictive hypothesis. This is why paranormal or psi phenomena is so important. And that's why Birkbeck College, where I went to school, when it was run by John Hasted and David Bohm, everything was paranormal phenomena. And working with Uri Geller and others, trying to figure out what is the abductive explanation for this incredible phenomena that is very, very real. And of course, Sherlock Holmes, here's a statue in Edinburgh. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle came up with the concept. And by the way, when Watson says brilliant deduction, Sherlock, no. It's brilliant abduction. It's not deductive. It is abductive. That, and here William James, a quote from him, "The great field for new discoveries is always the unclassified residuum. Round about the accredited and orderly facts of every science, there ever floats a sort of dust cloud of exceptional observations, the anomalies. Anyone will renovate his or her science who will steadily look after the irregular phenomena. And when the science is renewed, its new formulas often have more of the voice of the exceptions in them than of what were supposed to be the rules." And as Max Planck says, the person, I'm going to say now, who cannot occasionally imagine events and conditions of existence that are contrary to the causal principle as he knows it, will never enrich his science by the addition of a new idea. And as William James said, if there's anything which human history demonstrates, it is the extreme slowness with which the ordinary academic and critical mind acknowledges facts to exist, which present themselves as wild facts with no stall or pigeonhole, or as facts which threaten to break up the system. Now, in section 20 of the new book, and I'm not going to do them all here, I'll do a lecture in the future and we'll go through these 42 anomalies because they're incredible. But this family of 42 anomalies and the golden ratio as abductive inference to what we call the best explanation, and is how the one becomes many. The greatest philosophical question of all time: how does the one become many? Now, Lucian Hardy is brilliant. In the end, we are driven to search for what we hope will turn out to be the correct ontology of the world. of what exists in it. After all, it is the desire to understand what reality is like that burns deepest in the soul of any true physicist. What Lucian Hardy discovered, and didn't realize it because he rounded the number off originally, and Penrose and El Nashi and others who might have known what he got, they didn't see it. Hardy discovered that entanglement, probability, therefore non-locality of two particles, is exactly equal to the lesser golden ratio to the fifth power. Edgar Mitchell, very good friend, now no longer with us, unfortunately. It has been widely accepted in science until recently that the brain was likely merely a complex classical computer incapable of supporting quantum processes. The work by Hameroff and Penrose in isolating and describing microtubules in brain tissue have caused a re-examination of this dogma and renewed interest in uncovering the quantum processes involved. The golden physics of consciousness. The first Penrose anomaly is, why do Fibonacci numbers appear in microtubules? 13, 8, 5. Because they're whole number approximations to the golden ratio. It's how nature works and resonates. And in fact, these microtubules here and the clathrons that we're going to look at in a moment are at the synaptic cleft. So when there is transformation of consciousness, these things are going into resonance. It is all, in the end, resonance. The second Penrose anomaly, quantum reduction, the collapse of a wave into a particle, it's a non-local process. And I've just told you where non-locality comes from. It's at phi to the fifth power. It's golden. It's resonant with the golden ratio, just as the microtubules, and as we'll see, the clathrons, are resonant as well. So Penrose and Hameroff, 2011, first provocatively suggested that consciousness emerges through the quantum mechanics of microtubules. And microtubules are composed of 13 filaments exhibiting 8x5 phyllotaxis. Phyllotaxis originally meant leaf arrangement. So you look at a sunflower, you see phyllotaxis. You see the relationship of the spirals going both directions. And you may have 34:21 or 13:8, or a pine cone. You'll see 13:8 or 8:5. But that's what's happening with these microtubules. And clathrons, located at the tips of the microtubules, are truncated icosahedra, abuzz with golden ratios. And DNA, in both its decagonal structure and its Fibonacci guided nucleotide organization, exhibits a golden ratio or phi resonance. In 2019, Hameroff observed that OR, which is the Penrose-Hameroff theory of consciousness, indicates that anesthetics dampen and psychedelics or entheogens, soma, kukian, ayahuasca, promote quantum vibrations in microtubules. Tangled or mutated tau proteins, which when normal stabilize and assist microtubules, result in microtubule disintegration, leading to dementia, Alzheimer's disease, destabilizing consciousness, and apparently cancer as well. So here you see a healthy microtubule with the stabilizing tau molecules. And here you see the microtubule subunits falling apart as the tau proteins are kind of getting disintegrating. And in his 2019 presentation, Construction of an Integrated Model of Neuronal Biological Circuitry, Tuzinski stated that mitochondria are photon entities and microtubules may be receivers. They're like antennas. And again, it's all resonance. We go into these non-ordinary states of consciousness or transformative experiences through yoga and qigong and meditation, or Buddha, Siddhartha sitting under the bo tree, goes into quantum coherence, possibly with the entire planet, more likely the solar system, possibly galaxy, potentially samadhi can go to the entire universe. So clathrons, closely associated with the microtubules, as I said, are involved in the synaptic neurotransmitter release and are truncated icosahedra. They're buckyballs. And here's an example over here on the right with golden geometric resonance. Here you see on the right-hand side, if it's not covered by images, you'll see a truncated icosahedron, your football, that if you take and do these rectangles inside, if the edge is 1, that's exactly 3 times the greater, 3 times big phi. Anita Rupan discovered that the neocortex appears to have found a way to pack as many minimally interfering frequency bands as possible into the available frequency space by using phi as a common ratio between adjacent frequencies in the EEG spectrum. And then Sir Harold Kroto, who won the Nobel Prize with Smalley and Curl for the discovery of the structure of carbon-60 as being a truncated icosahedron. And here I am, we're in Delft. Let's see, we're at the Symmetry Conference here in Delft, the Netherlands. So consciousness and resonance, this first Penrose anomaly, we've kind of addressed it already. And in 2019, Hameroff indicated that EEG waves, there's always been a mystery as to how they're actually forming, where they're coming from, including gamma synchrony, the best neural correlate of consciousness, now appear to be the result of microtubule oscillations. Microtubules are not only in the brain, they're in the body, but they're also in animals and they're in plants. The whole deal is resonating with this golden ratio resonance. The second Penrose anomaly, quantum reduction, quantum wave collapse, is non-local, and that's our feet of the fifth going on. And golden Fibonacci anyons, which are neither fermions nor bosons, provide the simplest model for universal quantum computation by particle exchange or braiding alone. In fact, Herman Otto, another one of the E-infinity contributors, states that Fibonacci anyons as qubits may be the ultimate approach to quantum computation, quote, because they naturally simulate processes which determine the speed and storage capacity of the human mind or brain. Taken together, this family of 42 striking facts, puzzles, or anomalies, many of them biometric, lead abductively towards an inevitable, what we call inference to the best explanation of the deep significance of a golden ratio substructure enfolded into nature and the cosmos. The golden mean number system underpins nature's optimal form, function, and even consciousness. The overall result is that the Pythagorean Plato's principles of the one and the indefinite dyad, the golden ratio and its reciprocal, the greater and the lesser, and the one as their geometric mean, provide a proportional golden mean number system that is enfolded, infused into nature and the cosmos as its very substructure. Life, what we call hylozoism, everything is alive, and consciousness, panpsychism, we're going to look at cosmopsychism in a second, pour in from the very beginning. They're writing these golden numbers from the superstructure that appears with the initial ontological act. Big cut, big bang, big bounce, or probably closer to the theosophical approach is Penrose's approach, the rebirth of the universe as in conformal cyclic cosmology. That's the big one that's now on the table. This is also pervasive evidence of how the one, the source, becomes a many, infusing itself into each and every part through an initial asymmetric golden cut that perpetuates itself holographically through a fractal golden number symphony. This is the grand unification of the sciences, arts, and consciousness manifested through a golden mean number system. As Bohm's Holo movement would suggest, each part has the entire universe enfolded into it with all the infinite potential and possibility implicit within that can be unfolded along the way. Appendix 16. Now, these are taken from the book. few quotations concerning consciousness, the brain, and the mystical. Physics is the study of consciousness, according to Sir Arthur Eddington. Max Planck, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. David Bohm and Basil Hiley, two of my professors at Birkbeck. Consciousness is a coherent whole, which is never static or complete, but which is in an unending process of movement and unfoldment. Douglas Baker, one of my mentors there, the goal of all major esoteric traditions and of all world religions is entry into a higher kingdom of nature, into the realm of the gods. This kingdom is known as the fifth kingdom, and one's awareness and experience of the world constitute what is referred to as the superconscious experience. It has been described by all those who have had this extraordinary glimpse of another world in ecstatic terms as a state of boundless being and bliss in which one's individual consciousness merges with the universal consciousness or Godhead. It is a state of being and awareness that far surpasses one's usual limited, narrow view of reality and transports one for a brief moment beyond the limits of time and space into another dimension. I need to add to that, there's another level at which there's death of the ego. So it is not just a merging. I mean, there's the Hindu, yes, merging Atman as Brahman, but there's the Buddhist, you die to the self, and then you're reborn literally into a new self. Albert Einstein, all religions, arts, and sciences are branches of the same tree. All these aspirations are directed towards ennobling man's life, lifting it from the sphere of the mere physical existence and leading the individual towards freedom. And in response to a question by Robert Herbert Goldstein, he says, I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists. And of course, William James, many of you have seen this quote before, our normal waking consciousness, rational consciousness as we call it, is but one special type of consciousness. Whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. We may go through life without suspecting their existence, but apply the requisite stimulus, and at a touch they are there in all their completeness, definite types of mentality. And no account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness quite disregarded. Divine sound is the cause of all manifestation. The knower of the mystery of sound knows the mystery of the whole universe. Hazrat Inyat Khan. And some of my input. In the beginning was the word, is logos, is ratio, is golden section, is primordial scission. The one fractally enfolds itself into the many, infusing life and consciousness into all. Hylozoism, and not merely panpsychism, it is cosmopsychism. The entire universe is not only alive, it is aware. Resonance connects each of the many back to the one. Through a series of quantum coherent expansions of consciousness via resonant identification, the individual approaches transformation or samadhi, transformation of consciousness. So we see some of these are quite old actually. Scientific American, are you a hologram? Quantum physics says the entire universe. They don't say might be, it is. And then we have the fractal universe. So each portion is a fractalized image of the whole. That's why it's holographic. Each image contains the information of the entire universe. And that's where David Bohm enters in. The essential features of quantum interconnectedness are that the whole universe is in some way enfolded in everything, and that each thing is enfolded in the whole. And by golly, we figured out how it's enfolded now. That's E-infinity group is really responsible for it, but that's through following Plato. So thus, like a hologram, each fractal part contains in potential the information of the whole. Not only will we provide, and this is in the introduction to the book, strong evidence that consciousness and the associated resonant states of awareness are guided by the same golden mean number system, but this potential can ultimately be fully realized through resonant unfoldment into a non-local state of cosmic consciousness known as samadhi, or sahaj, or satori. Witness as an example the climactic cosmic conscious experience of Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell during his return journey to Earth after becoming the 6th person to walk on the moon. When I did lectures with, or a lecture with Edgar Mitchell, well, we did more than one, but he was doing Frontiers of Consciousness study. I was tuning the same tune: consciousness, resonance, and self-identity. Because what happens is you re-identify, you lose your old identity, you die to it ultimately, and then re-emerge with the Christ within, or whatever you want to call it, the Atman or Buddha consciousness. So Edgar Mitchell was known as the brain by NASA and performed a successful significant psi study while on that Apollo mission. He went into samadhi on the way back. He founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He made no bones about the encounters of astronauts with extraterrestrial, not just objects, but intelligence. He was the 6th man to walk on the moon. And he liked, more than even my golden ratio work, abductive reasoning, the work that was part of my dissertation at the University of Florida. And here's what he says in The Way of the Explorer. I experienced a grand epiphany accompanied by exhilaration, an overwhelming sense of universal connectedness, an ecstasy of unity. And there was the sense that our presence and the existence of the universe itself was not accidental, but there was an intelligent process at work. I perceived the universe as in some way conscious. From that moment on, my life was irrevocably altered. And one of my favorite instances of a massive transformative experience was that of Gopi Krishna. I'm going to read it. I'm going to take a moment if you want to just close your eyes and listen. So this is Kundalini experience of cosmic consciousness. Suddenly, with a roar like that of a waterfall, I felt a stream of liquid light entering my brain through the spinal cord. Entirely unprepared for such a development, I was completely taken by surprise, but regaining my self-control, keeping my mind on the point of concentration, the illumination grew brighter and brighter, the roaring louder. I experienced a rocking sensation and then felt myself slipping out of my body, entirely enveloped in a halo of light. It is impossible to describe the experience accurately. I felt the point of consciousness that was myself growing wider, surrounded by waves of light. It grew wider and wider, spreading outward, while the body, normally the immediate object of its perception, appeared to have receded into the distance until I became entirely unconscious of it. I was now all consciousness, without any outline, without any idea of a corporeal appendage, without any feeling or sensation coming from the senses, immersed in a sea of light, simultaneously conscious and aware at every point, spread out, as it were, in all directions without any barrier or material obstruction. I was no longer myself, or to be more accurate, no longer as I knew myself to be, a small point of awareness confined to a body, but instead was a vast circle of consciousness in which the body was but a point, bathed in light and in a state of exaltation and happiness impossible to describe. After some time, the circle began to narrow down. I felt myself contracting, becoming smaller, Alice, until I again became dimly conscious of the outline of my body. As I slipped back to my old condition, I became suddenly aware of the noises in the street, felt again my arms and legs and head, and once more became my narrow self, in touch with my body and its surroundings. As Mitchell says, there are no unnatural or supernatural phenomena, only very large gaps in our knowledge what is natural. We should strive to fill those gaps of ignorance. And furthermore, religious and mystical experience in all psychic effects are, by this way of thinking, a result of the individual bringing non-local, phi-resonant information to the level of conscious awareness. When in these states and intending a particular action, resonances within the field are altered and energy from the 0-point field is available to create a desired effect. Then Eben Alexander, I'm here with him, both of us are presenting at the San Antonio International Association of Near-Death Studies. Here's what he writes. Extended consciousness phenomena, or psi, such as remote viewing, extrasensory perception, psychokinesis, clairvoyance, telepathy, and precognition have seemed stubbornly resistant to comprehend through standard scientific investigations. Before my coma, Nde, I doubted their veracity, mainly because I had never experienced them at a deep level and because they could not be readily explained by my simplistic scientific view of the world. Like many other scientific skeptics, I refused to even review the data relevant to the questions concerning these phenomena. I prejudged the data and those providing it because my limited perspective failed to provide the foggiest notion of how such things might actually happen. Those who assert there is no evidence for phenomena indicative of extended consciousness, in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, are willfully ignorant. They believe they know the truth without needing to look at the facts. Eben Alexander, MD, Harvard-trained neurosurgeon. And then Volkmar Weiss, also from the E-Infinity group. In terms of the anatomical background of array processing by the brain, there must exist a correspondence between anatomical structure, anatomical array, and the velocity and wave number of electrocortical waves. Only the mathematics of the golden section, golden mean, golden ratio, provides the basis for an optimal congruency between anatomical structure and code, a la Occam's razor, not multiplying unnecessarily your explanation. There's an immediate relationship between the, and this is for Melody who's watching, the hexagonal grid structure and the golden mean. See, for example, Golden Hexagons by Gunter Weiss, but this is from Volkmar Weiss. This is from the book. Appendix 9 in the book, phase transitions governed by the fifth power of the golden mean and beyond. And this contribution results from different disciplines of science were compared to show their intimate interweaving with each other, having in common the golden ratio to the fifth power. An architecture applicable for a quantum computer is proposed, consisting of 13-step twisted microtubules similar to tubular microtubules of living matter. Most topics point to the omnipresence of the golden mean as numerical dominator of our world. That's Herman Otto. Otto proposes phi to the fifth to model the DNA double helix genetic code. Quote, the connection between genetic code and resonance code of the DNA may lead us to a full understanding of how nature stores and processes compacted information and what indeed is consciousness linking everything with each other. And in times of a viral pandemic, it is essential to know the genetic code of DNA surface proteins to effectively block the replication capacity of any pathogenic virus via this route. Interesting. Importantly, liquid water forms helices of pentagonal or hexagonal symmetry. When subtracting from the regular tetrahedron angle of 109.47 degrees, the angle arc sine of the phi to the fifth, or phi to the fifth, is equal to 5.17 degrees, then the bonding angle of H2O is quite well adapted, giving 104.30 degrees. This connection to the golden mean hierarchy is intriguing. It is reasonable to assume that water may be involved, excuse me, in two ways in the origin of life, as a liquid medium and as helical scaffold, mediating the first assembling of double helix of nucleic acids. On the border between hexagonal and pentagonal, respectively, Fibonacci governed symmetry, our existence is located. Numerically, it may be emphasized by the relation phi to the fifth equals 5 times phi minus 3. So from Schuyler de Lubitsch's The Temple of Mind, the golden section is not a product of mathematical imagination, but the natural principle of the laws of equilibrium. And from Mahatma letter 90, Katumi, we recognize but one law in the universe, the law of harmony, of perfect equilibrium. That also includes disequilibrium. It's symmetry and asymmetry. But this is the key to the future. The golden mean number system, its platonic roots, paradigmatic symmetry, and quantum parameters. You have to tell me if we're okay to keep going. I was going to throw this in. This is the new paper that is now just emerged. We've given it to the European Journal of Applied Sciences, and I wrote it with El Nashi. And let me move this here again. If we can do this quickly, I will. But Damon, you speak up if we're going over it all. The golden mean number system may well be the most powerful tool in the physicist mathematician's arsenal. It emerges naturally out of Plato's two principles, the one and indefinite dyad of the greater and lesser. Herein, we unpack its structural backbone in the golden series of exponential powers. And you just see phi to the seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, etc., 1, and then up to the larger. So these are the smaller going that direction. These are the larger going that direction, along with its perfect combinatorial properties of addition and subtraction in growth and diminution, as well as through multiplication and division via application of the modular phi. Each step in this series, the new step is the previous one multiplied by the modular phi. So phi to the seventh times phi, phi to the sixth. Phi to the fifth is phi to the sixth times phi, but it's also phi to the seventh plus phi to the sixth. So it's additive and perfectly geometrical. It's unbelievable. We unravel the underlying paradigmatic symmetry of any given golden power, serving simultaneously as geometric, arithmetic, and harmonic means. And in the process, we reveal how the quantum parameters, including the pre-quantum particle, pre-quantum wave, what's known as Einstein spacetime, en route temperature, Hardy entanglement, and the Barbero-Emerzi parameter emerge naturally within Plato's famous republics of the sun, divided line, and cave. The golden mean number system has re-emerged completely, most completely and successfully in the E-infinity theory. It is, and Plato says, it is in this way, when they preserve the standard of the mean, that all their works are good and beautiful. The greater, phi, and the lesser, little phi, are to be measured in relation not only to one another, like phi is to phi or phi is to phi, but also to the establishment of the standard or the mean. Phi is to 1 is to phi, or phi is to 1 is to phi. This other comprises that which measures them in relation to the moderate, the fitting, the opportune, the needful, and all the standards that are situated in the mean between the extremes. Statesman 284A1 to E8. So we get the divided line. We saw this before, and so I'm just repeating it again so you see it. But now we're going to go a step further. Below, beginning with the golden sectioning of the one, we show how the quantum parameters naturally emerge as the fractal golden powers. So we take the one and we golden cut it into little baby phi and little phi, little phi squared. Well, phi is the pre-quantum particle. So here's the key over here, the guide. So we start with the one and we divide it into the pre-quantum particle, phi to the first, and the pre-quantum wave, phi to the second. And then the phi to the second, the wave, is to Einstein spacetime, phi cubed. Phi cubed, by the way, is 4.236. Yeah, there are 4 dimensions, but it's really the Hausdorff topological dimension means it's 4.236, or its inverse here is also Einstein spacetime, and it relative to the en route temperature, phi to the fourth. So again, you repeat this Einstein Space-time is to Unruh temperature, as Unruh is to Harding entanglement, as Unruh is to Hardy entanglement, as Hardy entanglement is to the Barbero-Immersi parameter. These are all in the new book, but if you're not familiar with this language, each of these has a mathematical relationship that links up topologically to the golden series. Now, what we've figured out is that the three means, it's incredible that the three means naturally emerge in the golden series. Now, rather than take a lot of time to do this with you, I'll just show you Harding's diagram, the original one. If we had maybe in the future I can go into more detail on this, but it's really fairly simple. The geometric mean is simply, if you have two numbers, say 2 and 8, then the geometric mean would be between them. The geometric mean would be the square root of 2 times 8 is 16, square root is 4. Arithmetic mean is you simply add the two together, 2 plus 8 is 10, and you divide by the two numbers is 5. And the other one, harmonic mean, is a little bit more tricky, and you end up with 3.2. However, in the golden series, this is how, when you have the golden mean here as being phi, you have 1 and phi squared, it links up, but then you'll see the arithmetic mean links up phi squared and phi, and the harmonic mean links up phi and phi squared. And in the that was the Hardy diagram. The Tetlow reminded us that you can slide these along back and forth and they retain their structure. So this structure with the harmonic mean remains the same. And that led me to realize there is a paradigmatic symmetry going on between 1 and the indefinite dyad when you slightly extend it to include the greater squared and the lesser squared. And if you look at this carefully, we don't need to go through the words over here. Notice you have perfect bilateral symmetry here, and then you have a kind of mirrored asymmetry here, where the arithmetic mean extends out here and the harmonic mean extends over one place over here. And so thus it became clear that the means can slide. So here's your paradigmatic mean centered on phi squared, but notice the whole system can simply move up and down the scale, giving rise to how nature is incredibly resonantly linked together. So here are all the three means centered on phi in this case. This would be a paradigmatic symmetry. Here's another one centered on Harding's entanglement, phi to the 5th, linking Barbero-Immersi parameter with the Unruh temperature and the Einstein spacetime. And here's another one with Barbero-Immersi with at the center. Finally, let us note here that MIT physicists led by Pablo Harillo Herrero discovered that bilayered graphene twisted by, and they simply say generally about 1.1 degrees, allow electrons to become easily entangled and superconductive. We, in this case, El-Nashi and myself, predict they will eventually discover this angle is precisely phi to the 12th times 360 degrees is 1.1118, etc. This should give rise to the discovery of further quantum parameters as illustrated below in our phi to the 12th. Actually, I found this initially and he agreed with me. So we're calling it the Olsen-El-Nashi entanglement. And here you see it's centered. And this should lead to deeper, more subtle discoveries within quantum mechanics in the future. Conclusion. The essential features of quantum interconnectedness are that the whole universe is in some way enfolded in everything, and each and everything is enfolded in the whole. At the root of all the deep questions within physics lies the number system one employs in the process. Together with our E-infinity theory collaborators, we have found that the golden mean number system is indeed the lingua franca of nature. Its backbone emerges naturally as the golden series of exponential powers out of Plato's principles of the one and the indefinite dyad, of the greater and the lesser. And it all begins with the golden section, or as the ancient Egyptians called it, the primordial scission, of which the Great Pyramid of Giza is a monument to this very thing. It is highlighted by its naturally recursive nature, similar to, but even more profound than its derivative whole number Fibonacci series of number. The latter, Fibonacci numbers, are perfectly additive, yes, but approximately geometric, with the golden ratio again. Each one is approximately the previous multiplied by the golden ratio, whereas the former is perfectly additive and perfectly geometric. Furthermore, it harbors the most stunning internal structure of paradigmatic symmetry, linking all aspects of the golden powers together in an incredible synchrony of synchrony. And finally, we have shown how the quantum mechanical parameters of the pre-quantum particle, wave, Einstein space-time, unroot temperature, Hardy entanglement, and Barbero-Emersi parameter can be naturally and effectively aligned within Plato's three similes of the sun, divided line, and cave. This is the process of how the whole universe is fractally and holographically unfolded into each and every part. The golden mean number system is, in fact, the common language, the lingua franca of nature, and holds the key to unpacking the fractal nature of the universe, penetrating into its outer fabric and inner mysteries. It has reemerged most completely and satisfactorily in the modern era of high energy physics and cosmology through the stunning simplicity of the many computational successes of the infinity theory. In the end, we have on display what we have on display is literally the answer to the greatest philosophical question of all. How does the one become the many? And that's it. But I did tell Damon, if we're going, we'll still have time for questions. I just want to share this very quickly, and it's probably good to have it in the film because, you know, we don't come up with these ideas in a vacuum. I rely upon so many different theosophical thinkers, writers, primarily the Mahatma letters, Blavatsky, but I also have turned to Bailey, many others, Steiner and others. I've also been involved in 14 of the 15 New York Open Center esoteric quests. I originally filmed all of them until we got to Samothrace, and then I started doing the lectures for them as well. But I've learned so much in the process. Here is the first esoteric quest to Chesky Krumlov, and you see some of the people involved: Alvin Holm, the architect, Bembridge. Here's John Michel, Jonas Ruta, yours truly, Jocelyn Gladwin, incredible writer, author. And these people have all been extremely important to me in my quest: Baker, Alexander, Pim von Lommel, Muhammad, Houston, J.J. Hertog, Mitchell, Hameroff, Grotto. Dan Petto is the one who taught me geometry and taught me the golden section, in fact, at the University of Minnesota. Bohm was very important at Birkbeck, Amrit Desai, the yogi, Pablo Amaringo, the ayahuasquero, began my endeavor with sacred, mystical, visionary art. Frioff Capra, who wrote the Tao of Physics, 4 shamans here we brought to Florida, Ralph Metzner, Sir Roger Penrose, Lucian Hardy, El Nashi, Garnet Ord, who brought fractals into physics. It wasn't Mandelbrot. Yes, Mandelbrot is responsible for bringing out these fractals, but Garnet Ord brought it into physics, and then Alexei Stakov, who was there at Odessa. And then Petto is the one who turned me on to the mathematics from England originally, was my professor at the University of Florida, and through him, I did my Summa thesis on Platonic aesthetics back in '75. These are some of his books. Also, the Cairo Sacred Geometry Summer School have been extremely important. And then these 3 individuals have passed, but also important: John Michel, Nicholas Goodrick Clark, and Keith Critchell, all fellow countrymen of yours. And then finally, Ariel Sanat, Tim Boyd, David Bruce, Pablo Sender, and Joy Mills. I did probably the last interview of her before she passed. In the background always is Leadbeater, Blavatsky, and the rest. And then, of course, Ariel Sanat, who wrote the best book on K, Krishnamurti. Here's Bohm working with Geller, Hasted, who brought me into the physics department when I was studying philosophy at Birkbeck, working with Geller. Here's the physics department, Bohm, Basil Hiley, Hasted, and of course, Rupert Sheldrake has been important. Many in the ions group, I just threw in a few that have been extremely important. Most of them I've done interviews with: Daniel Brinkley, PMH Atwater, Kimberly Clark Sharp, Pim Van Lommel, Bruce Grayson, Ken Ring. And then my own experience as a child, having the perinatal experience and taking in all the beauty, working on the proportions of the body through the emphasis of my brother, and then looking at nature. My book, The Golden Section, became a bestseller and topped the list. It was the overall bestseller in the Wooden Books series. And of course, then the Golden Key is the little Trinity or Phi 1 and Little Baby Phi, Fibonacci series, Lucas series. That's it. Thank you.